Om Tavakatam Ritam Tapta Jivanam Kavibiriritam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Shrimadatatam Bhuvingarnantiye Burida Janaha. Om, may the nectar of your words, the praise of poet-seers, elixir to parched souls, delight to listening ears, cleanser of all sins, is great and glorious. They who spread it far and wide on earth are most generous. Good evening, friends. We are reading from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. For those that are following along, we are still on page 104. And the last time we met, Ramakrishna was talking about the spiritual states of mind the spiritual states of experiences between a jnani and a vijnani. A jnani is one that realizes the impersonal aspect of God, and the vijnani realizes God even more intimately, so much so that he also experiences God in his personal aspect. And he also recognizes that God is endowed with many powers, like creation, preservation, destruction. He's omniscient, all-pervading, and all-powerful. So we will continue reading from where we left off. Ramakrishna says, he's talking to Vidyasagar, the vijnani sees that Brahman is immovable and actionless like Mount Sumeru. This universe consists of the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. They are in Brahman, but Brahman is unattached. Now, a whole lecture can be given on what are the three gunas, but in brief, according to Sankhya philosophy and cosmology, this world consists of both matter and spirit. Matter they call prakriti, spirit they would call purusha. Prakriti, which is the matter part of the universe, consists of these three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. And they use the analogy that they are like three strands in a rope. They're intertwined, but the three of them are required to be, they interact with each other to create all the different material objects that are, and not just objects, emotions, all the feelings, anything that this material world consists of. So some of the characteristics of sattva would be the ability of the mind to gain knowledge, be clarity, purity, concentration. It will be a certain lightness. Even material objects that have light, that are light in weight, or as compared to something heavier in weight, would possess more sattva, like a feather, compared to this podium, would have more sattva in a feather than, say, in a material object. And from the mental standpoint, it will be one that is peaceful in temperament, shows contentment, as opposed to someone who is rajasic. The mind is always active, very restless, always in motion, cannot sit still. Also, and then tamas is described as something that's inert, heavy, lazy, depressed, with a certain amount of heaviness. So you would say an object like the podium will have more tamas than a feather. So all the material objects contain these three substances in various proportions. And when Purusha is in the presence of Prakriti. They are all activated. Otherwise, when Purusha is not present, then they are in a state of equilibrium. And at that point, there is no creation either. So when they are all active and interacting, that's creation is continuing. It's advancing, it's progressing. It's just, we just basically have no control over it. It's Prakriti, or what's sometimes called Mother Nature, is in control of it, of everything. Now, Sri Ramakrishna says, they are all in Brahman. Prakriti and Purusha are in Brahman, but Brahman is unattached. It's like a store owner goes into a store, got clothing here, he's got tools there, he's got knickknacks and souvenirs here. He goes through the store, he's not attached to any one of those objects. He owns all those objects until they are sold. His only goal is satisfy the customer, give them what they want, make them happy, and sell what he can, order more stuff. He's interested in running the business. He's not attached to any of those particular items. So God is not attached to any of these material things that are part of this world. And so that's just an analogy, but it's similar to that. So God is not attached to anything involving Prakriti, or not attached to Purusha, or the spiritual part, the spirit part of creation, which would consist of like the soul, individual souls. The sum of all the souls is you would call the universal Purusha. So God, Brahman is not attached to any of those. It's just like the impartial witness. He just is immoved by anything that happens in that creation. So the Vijnani further sees that what is Brahman is the Bhagavan. So he also experiences the personal aspect of God, not just the impersonal that the Jnani has experienced. So he who is beyond the three gunas is the Bhagavan, with his 6 supernatural powers. Those would be the powers of creation, preservation, destruction. It would be his all-knowingness, ever-present, all-powerful. All these are the manifestations of his power. And then it says in parentheses, with a laugh. Now, there will be many places in the Gospel where it'll say, with a laugh, and you'll wonder, what is so funny here that people are laughing? Well, he was speaking in Bengali, and he would have said something, and he would have said this with a certain amount of wit that would have been understood by the people present. It cannot be put into translation. And it's for this reason that many of the monks would like to study the Bengali version of the Gospel, so they can understand, well, what is everyone laughing at? But for us readers here, this is what Sri Ramakrishna says, this is how Swami Nikhilananda translated it, but there's nothing to laugh at. All we can look at is what the essential translation is, so that whatever knowledge is there is not going to be lost. Then Sri Ramakrishna continues, if an aristocrat has neither house nor property, or he has been forced to sell them, one doesn't call him an aristocrat anymore. And all laugh. God is endowed with the 6 supernatural powers. If he were not, who would obey him? All laugh. Just see how picturesque this universe is, how many things there are, the sun, moon, and stars, and how many varieties of living beings, big and small, good and bad, strong and weak, some endowed with more power and some with less. Vidyasagar is listening to Sri Ramakrishna very intently. And he, in his way, asks, has he endowed some with more power and others with less? This question that he's asking shows his extreme humility, because he is perhaps the most educated person in the room right now. If you look at scholarship, he was also a social reformer and a very respected educator. He started schools. M, who put together the gospel, was the principal of one of those schools. So here, and he, even as a student, he desired to know basically as much as he could, even though he grew up poor. Education was not exactly easily accessible to everyone, but he would study even under the street lights because they could not afford the fuel to light the lanterns at home. And whatever he learned well and quickly, so much so that he would pass tests and get scholarships to continue his studies. So for him to ask this question, when you compare his scholarship to many others, he was extremely educated, so he must have been endowed with a certain power of concentration, love for knowledge. So now he's asking this question, has he endowed some with more power and others with less? The Master is saying, as the all-pervading spirit, he exists in all beings, even in the ant. But the manifestations of his power are different in different beings. Otherwise, how can one person put 10 to flight while another can't face even one? Yeah, you'll find that there are some people that can fight with 10 people at a time, but another person gets beaten up by one. So yes, there's skill, there's strength, there's psychology, all these things. So everyone is different. And then Sri Ramakrishna says, and why do all people respect you? So he says, have you grown a pair of horns? And then there's laughter. Well, they don't respect him because he's a freak. They respect him for his knowledge. And the Master continues, you have more compassion and learning. Therefore, people honor you and come to pay you their respects. Don't you agree with me? Well, now Vidyasagar is somewhat embarrassed, I suppose, but he just smiles and keeps quiet. The Master continued, there is nothing in mere scholarship. The object of study is to find means of knowing God and realizing Him. So Vidyasagar was raised in a traditional Brahmin family. Well, actually, no, I don't remember. No, I don't think it was in a Brahmin family. But I will let that go at the moment because I don't know what I'm talking about. But at this moment, he studied. He has an interest in understanding something about the existence of things, because he studied literature mostly, languages, astronomy. But here he is now talking to Sri Ramakrishna, which is really perhaps what he's most interested in, is that he's making sense, but he doesn't have the same scholarship. He hasn't studied all the scriptures as the traditional other holy men of those days did. And so he's also curious, how does he know all these things? But the Master says, no, there's nothing in mere scholarship, but the object of study is to find a means of knowing God and realizing Him. So you study the scriptures, not to say that that's what God is, but as inspiration to dive deeper into what is the nature of God, what is the nature of man, what is the relationship between God and man. So, and then he goes on to say, a holy man had a book. When asked what it contained, he opened it and showed that on all the pages were written the words, Om Rama, and nothing else. In other words, in this world of all these variations and things, in the end, all that exists really is God. And that is the highest knowledge, not actually the knowledge of understanding all the different aspects of the material world. Because all these material things are just they're just a part of God, one aspect of God. You are only limiting your knowledge if this is all you want to know about. And he continues, what is the significance of the Gita? It is what you find by repeating the word 10 times. It's like a tongue twister. You say a word 10 times and pretty soon it starts to sound a little different to your ears. So you say it quickly, Gita, Gita, Gita. It starts being Tagi, Tagi. So he says that it then becomes reversed into Tagi, which means a person who has renounced everything for God. Now, you might say, well, that's not reversed. Reversed of Gita is A-T-I-G. But every consonant has a vowel sound associated with it. So really you have to look at the consonant and then the vowel sound associated with it. So in Gita, it's ta, T-A, could be T-E or T-I, but in this case it's T-A, so it's ta. And then Gita, Gi, so the reverse means just Tagi. And the Gita, of course, the words of Lord Krishna, is giving spiritual teachings, but all those teachings are, in the end, to realize God. And the only way you can realize God is to renounce the things of the world. And then he says that is the lesson of the Gita. Well, actually he said, and the lesson of the Gita is, O man, renounce everything and seek God alone. Continues, whether a man is a monk or a householder, he has to shake off all attachment from his mind. So even to realize God, you cannot hold your mind onto anything in this world. Now, as we live day to day, we get attached to one thing or the other. Be an object, it could be emotional attachment to family, it could be attachment to desires and things that you want to attain in life, name and fame, money, pleasure and pain, and all these things come. They all have their pairs of opposites. Anything you try to attach to can be snatched away as quickly as you become attached to it and cause you pain and discomfort. And you swear, I'll never do that again, but no doubt the mind gets attached to it again and you gravitate toward it. So you suffer, you have pleasure one moment, suffer in the next. But if you can really renounce any one object, then that can no longer have its effect on your mind. You won't, if you lose something, the loss of it won't devastate you. But if you offer to God, or you think, well, this belongs to you, O Lord, this is not really mine, it never was. You take care of it. That's one way of just releasing it giving it back to its source. Rather than you trying to pull everything around you and have all your favorite things around you, let them go. They're not really yours. It's just some delusion that you have that you own this and own that, and you want to keep all these things around you because the sight of them gives you pleasure, or the feel of something gives you pleasure, or knowing that something is there or someone is listening to you is giving you pleasure. But in reality, they were never yours. You're just one aspect of that same thing that you're admiring. So these things all belong to God. So why are we attached to them? And studying the Gita lets you slowly release these things from your mind, and going through all the spiritual disciplines. So he continues, Chaitanya Deva set out on a pilgrimage to southern India. One day he saw a man reading the Gita. Another man, seated at a distance, was listening and weeping. His eyes were swimming in tears. Chaitanya Deva asked him, "Do you understand all this?" The man said, "No, revered sir, I don't understand a word of the text." "Then why are you crying?" asked Chaitanya. The devotee said, "I see Arjuna's chariot before me. I see Lord Krishna and Arjuna seated in the front of it, talking. I see this and I weep." So yes, you have the listener of the Gita relishes the words, tries to understand them. But then you also have the other type of devotee that will visualize the whole scene and experience the scene. And he experiences it in a more intense way than perhaps the person just listening to the words. So both are devotees, and both are detached from the world by listening to the Gita or by experiencing the whole scene leading up to the Gita being explained. So why does a Vijnani keep an attitude of love toward God? The answer is that I consciousness persists. It disappears in the state of samadhi, no doubt, but it comes back. In the case of ordinary people, the I never disappears. You may cut down the ashwatha tree, but the next day sprouts shoot up. All laugh. So when a Vijnani, when he still keeps this attitude of love toward God, that means that he still keeps, or he intentionally keeps, a sense of separation between his object of worship and himself, so that he can experience God, he has a fuller sense of experience of God than just an impersonal aspect, than worshiping or experiencing just the impersonal aspect. And he does so, well, there are different levels of samadhi, and at various levels, the sense of I-ness, the strength of this sense of I-ness diminishes at the higher levels to the point of not existing at all. But at lower levels, you experience a sense of what they call like bhava samadhi, where you experience a sense of love and devotion towards a chosen ideal or the object of worship. And at that point, there is still a slight sense of ego that you are the one loving God. And at that stage, you are also feeling at times that you are serving God. So even when you are working in the world, you feel that what I'm doing is I'm serving God as an act of love. So you still think of God as somebody slightly separate. But that doesn't mean that in deeper states of meditation that you will then merge into the impersonal aspect of God also. You go beyond even this personal aspect. And that is what was happening to Swami Ramakrishna when he would go between different states, have his different spiritual experiences at different levels of samadhi. But then when you come back down from that state, no doubt this ego returns. And in the case of ordinary people, the I never disappears. Well, they never get into that state of samadhi. They're always oscillating between different states of mind, so they are always aware of themselves or have a sense of ego. They always feel like they are the ones responsible. They are the ones doing things. They never feel that God is doing things or God is in control of life. They feel they want to be in control. And as a result, they suffer. They suffer because they are thinking in a very small, limited way. God is thinking on a much bigger scale. So he is not thinking about the day-to-day confrontations of a single ego. And by staying in that state, we cause our own suffering. And I don't know if you ever noticed, here Sri Ramakrishna gives the example, you may cut down the ashwatha tree, but the next day sprouts shoot up. Well, weeds are like that. I look at our lawn when we had all this hot weather, all the grass, the weeds are subdued. We get a nice thunderstorm overnight and some rain. And I swear the weeds are 2 inches taller. They are now standing above the grass. And I know that I had plucked them some weeks before. I thought to get them down below the grass level, but with just the right environment, they will sprout up again. And with India, with its moist, humid environment, you can cut down anything and it'll grow back. But to speak of an ashwatha tree, I think they call it here a peepal tree. It's something like a banyan tree, I believe. And that just grows, it grows wild there. Those trees can grow so big, cover so much acreage, it's unbelievable. Because their very branches can take root somewhere else, become a tree trunk. Swami Ramakrishna continues, even after the attainment of knowledge, this I consciousness comes up. Nobody knows from where. You dream of a tiger, then you awake, but your heart keeps on palpitating. All our suffering is due to this I. The cow cries, Hamba, which means I. That is why it suffers so much. It is yoked to the plow and made to work in sun and rain. Then it may be killed by the butcher. From its hide, shoes are made and also drums, which are mercilessly beaten. And then this laughter. still it does not escape suffering. At last, strings are made out of its entrails for the bows used in carding cotton. Then it no longer says humba, humba, I, but tuhu, tuhu, which means thou, thou. Only then are its troubles over. O Lord, I am the servant, thou art the master. I am the child, thou art the mother. So only when you get rid of this I can you have complete surrender to God. And only then will you be free of all suffering. But you will also not be aware of your I-ness. And sometimes that thought frightens people. Oh, what will happen? I will lose my personality. I will lose what I am, what my sense of whatever you feel, whatever you treasure about your ego. You'll lose that. You don't want to lose that. So you say, no, that's maybe not where I want. Maybe not what I want to do. If I'm going to lose that, then maybe it's not worth it. But the thing is that your little I will merge into a bigger I. What we think of as our I and our small personality, that's all we have experienced. If we actually experienced that infinite I-ness, that the very vastness of and unlimitedness and total freedom of what God is, or what one can experience as the truth, then we might change our mind. At this moment, all we have are their words of reassurance that if we strive and want to really know about God and experience God, then we have to put together some effort. But then no effort goes in vain. And what you gain in all of this must certainly be worth the effort, especially if it means the highest freedom, which also means freedom from suffering, freedom from pain. But it also means you won't have the same kind of pleasures that you might experience as what we would experience as human beings. You would have a higher sense of pleasure. What that is, I have no idea, but I'm only trusting the words of Swami Nikhilananda here. And why would I trust his words? Well, he's a person who's speaking about these things without any ulterior motive. He never asked for any money for all these teachings. He wouldn't accept money. He gave all these teachings freely because he felt he had to. He did it out of love for the truth, to teach only the truth. There was no Ramakrishna order in these days, nothing that you want to donate to further its progress. It was just one holy man talking to students and to people. There was no thought of organization. There was no books. There were no books to publish. He wasn't getting paid to give speeches or talks. He was just getting food and a place to live, that's all. But he gave all these teachings. So I don't see why we should disregard those words, because he did it out of love. And I think that's one of the things we will learn as we go through the gospel. And so I will conclude today on that note. If anyone has any questions, either here in person or online, I will try my best to answer. Just a note about Vidyasagar. Rabindranath Tagore once wrote about him. He said, one wonders how God, in the process of producing 40 million Bengalis produced one such man. So, yes, you put in the effort, you get the power of concentration, the power to actually do something to help society and humanity. Yeah, he was a social reformer. He was not a social media person. There's no social media. So if you're into social media, we better become a social reformer. And we could start with ourselves. So I see no questions in other locations. So I will conclude with a chant. Om Niranjanam Nityam Anantarupam Bhakta Nukampa Ditavigraham Vaim Ishavataram Paramesamidhyam Tvam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namamaha. We salute that Ramakrishna who is without blemish, eternal and infinite in forms, who has assumed human form out of compassion for the devotees, who is God incarnate, the Supreme Lord, and who is most worshipful.